Hey guys, welcome to DIY Projects with Pete. In today's episode, we'll walk through the process of installing a DIY mini split by mrcool. If you find the video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and let's get to it.
If you followed along with the channel, a couple years ago, I built this 12 by 20 lean-to style building to use as a warming house for our backyard hockey rink. It's heated solely with a wood stove, which has worked great, but with our second child due in October, a baby girl, and my current work area becoming a nursery for her, I converted the warming house to also be used as an office. However, it turns into a sauna on a 90-degree day, and it's not much fun to work in. I did put in blinds, which helped a little, but it's still too hot. Plus, I wanted an efficient way to also heat the space in the wintertime while I work and when it's being used as a warming house, and I don't want to have to start and tend a fire every time it gets used. Hence, the idea to install a DIY ductless mini split system was born, as it has a heat pump so it can heat and cool the building. Today's video is sponsored by mrcool, which is a family-owned HVAC brand that makes do-it-yourself HVAC systems that DIYers like yourself can install. I'm excited to show you the install process and a few of its features and benefits to help you decide if this could be a good solution and project for your home, shed, or backyard office as well. All right, so the new mini split just got delivered. It is a few boxes, and we'll see how it goes together. In today's video, we'll install the 12,000 BTU version, which will heat or cool up to a 500 square foot area. The main parts are the air handler for the inside of the building, the line set, and the condenser unit, which will go outside. The first step is to determine the best place to put the mini split in your home or your shed. You'll need to have enough room on the wall to fit the width of the unit plus a few inches, and somewhere that looks good. And in our case, there's a corner of the room that will fit nicely, so that's what we're going to go with. Now this works well since the line sets and wiring can go straight out to the back of the building where there's plenty of room for it, and it's hidden a bit from plain eyesight when looking at the building from the front. Place the condenser near where it will be installed so you can get an idea of how it's going to look and make sure it's relatively close to your circuit breaker or disconnect box. We'll be attaching the condenser to the building on a bracket for this project, but you could pour a small concrete pad to place it on if you'd prefer. Next, we'll get ready to install the air handler unit by first removing the bracket that will eventually get mounted to the wall. You'll find a cardboard template the size of the air handler that can be used to determine placement for the unit and so you can mount the bracket and drill a hole in the wall for your line set and wiring. Use a stud finder to locate the studs in your wall so your bracket will be mounted securely. Most likely the studs will be every 16 or 24 inches on center. Move horizontally with the stud finder and mark each stud location. The directions for your specific mini split will give you the minimum clearance requirements for your air handler, so make sure to check out the manual. The unit requires about 5 inches of space on the left and right sides and 6 inches from the ceiling, and then they recommend installing it at least about 6.5 feet from the floor if your ceilings are less than 9 feet. Tape the template to the wall, level it, and use it to simulate where the air handler will go. This template will also help in lining up your bracket as well as the area to drill the 3.5-inch hole in the wall. They do recommend installing the bracket to studs on each side if you have 16-inch on-center studs. And after taping the template up, I pre-drilled holes where I'd fasten the bracket to the wall, and you can mark the holes on the bracket that coordinate with the template to easily line it up. If you're able to attach it to 16-inch on-center studs, it's going to be super solid with 2 screws on each side. The air handler is actually pretty light, so it doesn't take much to support the unit. Now after installing it, I decided I wanted to go a couple more inches to the right just so I had a bit more clearance from the sidewall where the hockey jerseys are hung. So I got the template back out and remarked where each hole would need to go. In doing so, I was only able to attach the right side of the bracket to a stud, and then I was able to use drywall anchors on the other side for a secure connection. The screws are still going into the right stud, just a few inches to the left on that metal bracket, and it's important to ensure your bracket is level so the unit will drain water properly if it needs to. The bracket can pivot out of the way so you can pre-drill and use drywall anchors if needed. I have 1/2-inch thick plywood walls, which provides pretty good stability without anchors, but figured I'd show the anchors being used in case you have drywall at your home. You can then put the rest of the screws in and add a couple extra if needed. The next step is to drill the 3.5-inch diameter hole for the line set and electrical wiring to go from the back of the air handler to the outside of the building. Be extra careful when using large hole saws like this one, as they have a lot of torque and can kick back if you're not careful, so just take your time and let the saw do the work. After going through the interior wall, you'll likely have a layer of sheathing and then siding to go through. They recommend drilling the hole for the exterior wall slightly lower, just so the drain hose from the air handler has a slope to run down and to drain properly. After drilling through each layer, make sure to clean the wood or the siding out of the hole saw. Here's a look at the hole after drilling through the interior wall and the exterior sheathing. You can use the drill bit hole to line up and go through the siding from the outside to get a nice clean cut all the way through. Now that we have the hole drilled, go ahead and test fit the plastic sleeve through it to see how it fits. Once I stuck the tube through, I could tell I went a little too low with the outside wall's hole since the flange didn't rest flush with the inside of my wall. And if this happens, you can use a jigsaw to enlarge the hole on the outside wall toward the top so the tube is at less of an angle, as it needs to only be at a very slight slope for the drain. Then go back outside and mark where to cut the tube so you can cut it flush with the siding. My camera missed filming the cut, but I cut the tube with a multi-tool, and you could of course use a handsaw or another method if you'd prefer. Test fit the tube and then use some silicone caulk around the flange to secure it to your wall. The flat side of the flange should face down so the air handler will completely cover it. Fill the gap around the tube to seal things off and to further secure it, and you can use a small level to check that it has that slight slope toward the outside still. Put some silicone around that cover plate and push it in until it's flush with the siding. Next, we'll pull this straight out at a 90-degree angle, nice and slow. The air handler is sitting upside down at the moment. Keep that drain line toward the underside of the line set and wiring by wrapping it with the UV wrap. They don't recommend using tape at this section, but I very lightly wrapped it with some electrical tape just to hold everything in place a little bit better. I put a couple rags in the tube so the bugs wouldn't get in while the silicone and foam cured a couple hours, and then came back to finish with the install of the inside unit. Then flip the air handler right side up so it's ready to install. We'll slide the electrical in first. And this air handler unit is actually real light, so I can just do it on my own here. We're gonna push this through. You wanna keep the drain line oriented toward the bottom. So we can just kind of push it in here. And we'll guide it through that opening there. It's going to go on top of the bracket. And then we'll snap it in place. You have the option of placing the outside condenser unit on either a concrete pad or a bracket on the building, and I chose to use a bracket to keep it up and off the ground. Now, I'm not going to go in depth on putting it together as it's just a few nuts and bolts, but it works well to assemble the pieces inside before installing everything on the outside of the building. Use a tape measure to help figure out placement for your bracket. I installed it so the horizontal arms will hold the condenser unit about 18 inches up from the ground. We get quite a bit of snow in the wintertime, and I plan to use it to heat the building throughout the winter, so making sure the snow doesn't affect it is important to me. Start by pre-drilling and then putting a leg bolt through the center hole and checking that it is level. Pre-drill the other two holes and insert the L brackets on the rear track to approximately fit the width of the feet on the condenser. At this point, you could fully secure the condenser to the bracket, but I temporarily secured it with just a couple bolts until I figured out if it was the best place for the bracket with where my line set was located. And I did decide to move the mount location after this was installed, and I'll explain why later in this video. The next step is to carefully bend the line set coming out of the building at close to a 90-degree angle so that it runs down your siding. Use one hand behind the line set to prevent it from bending too tightly so that you don't kink the copper pipe, and then slowly push the line set toward the siding with your other hand. The pre-charged line sets are the secret behind being able to do this as a DIY project, and they come in various standard lengths. Place the roll on the ground and begin uncoiling it so you can run a straight line down the side of your building, and in my case, this is just a couple feet out of the 16-foot coil. Then it's time to connect the line set, position the connection points close to each other, and remove the plastic cap that covers each of the connection points. These caps protect the pipes from debris, so keep them on until you get to this stage in the install, and they're color-coded so that you can match them up to the correct pipes. Thread the coupler together by hand to get it started. The line set is pretty rigid, so just take your time to get the threads lined up, and then tighten it by hand a couple times before grabbing for the crescent wrenches that are provided. You'll use a wrench on the top coupler and then a second on the bottom while tightening everything. And this is going to take a few minutes to do. Just keep wrenching until it's tightened up. You don't want to over tighten it, but just make sure it's plenty snug so you of course don't have any leaks. You'll be able to tell when it's tightened sufficiently, and then you can move on to the other connection. We're going to do a leak test later with some soapy water to double check that there are no leaks. One of the big reasons why I went with the mrcool DIY ductless mini split system is because it can be installed without the assistance of an HVAC professional, which will save a DIYer quite a bit of money. Once the line set was down, I realized having it on the left side of the unit and not at the center was going to work better for installing the line guard cover and for organizing and managing the coil of extra line set. This was my first time putting in a mini split, so I wasn't quite sure what would be the best placement, and it wasn't super clear in the directions, but this new location ended up working much better for my building mounted system. This was a quick fix, and after moving it, I filled the holes and adjusted the mounting arms so the unit sits level. I put the condenser on to test the width of the brackets. They look good, and so I secured the back of the L bracket to the building using one leg screw in each bracket. The condenser was put back on the bracket, and then you can slide the black rubber pads under each of the 4 feet where you'll bolt and secure the unit. The rubber pads will minimize vibrations from the condenser. A bolt and washer will go through the top side and will be secured from the underside with a nut, and each was hand tightened just in case I need to adjust it slightly when figuring out a good spot for the line set and for organizing everything. Now I was able to move the coil behind the unit, and I'm going to try and maneuver it lower between the bracket arms to maintain that 6 inches of clearance behind the back as best as possible. Try to push the line set so it's as close to the siding as you can get it. Then attach the clear plastic drain tube at the connection point and route the electrical cable to the right side of the unit. Use a Phillips screwdriver to remove the cover over the line set connections. You'll notice the caps are color-coded once again. Simply use a wrench to loosen them. We'll very carefully bend the end of the line sets to get them close to the connection points. You'll use both hands to do this, making sure not to bend anything too much so you don't kink any of the lines. With the bracket being so close to the building, I didn't have much space for all the extra line set, but if I can push it down between the brackets still after making those connections, I think it will be out of the way enough and still somewhat hidden. I honestly really took my time with bending the end of the coil as I didn't want to mess anything up, but with a little patience, I was able to get the couplers at the perfect angle for the connection points. Remove the caps right before making the connections so you don't get any debris in them, and then thread on each coupler. Like I said, just take your time and you'll be able to get the connection points to line up nicely. Then grab your crescent wrenches and tighten the connections. Once this is done, the line sets are all hooked up. Again, make sure not to over-tighten the connection. Remove the metal refrigerant valve covers using a wrench to get it started, and then unscrew it with your fingers. After this, it will be time to open the refrigerant valves using a 5mm Allen key wrench, which is provided, and if you listen closely, you'll hear the valve open as refrigerant fills the lines. Turn each of the valves counterclockwise as far as they will go. Put the metal valve covers back on, then you can check for leaks. I mixed up a soapy solution of water and dish soap in a spray bottle and shot it on the couplers where each of the connections were made. If any new bubbles begin to form, that indicates there is a leak and the connection needs to be retightened. But if all looks good at your lower connection points like mine did, go ahead and check the upper line set connections. Put the cover back on the unit and move on to working on the line set. Use a rag to wipe up any of the soapy mixture. Next, wrap the upper connectors with the black sound deadening pads to help minimize noise from the pipes. It's super sticky and it will easily wrap around each of the connections. Use the supplied pipe insulation already on the pipe and then the additional smaller sections in the box to better insulate the connections and exposed refrigerant pipe. Starting where the line set is not covered with the factory plastic, wrap it upward to the wall hole using the supplied non-adhesive UV tape. This will cover the insulated line set connections, cables, and drain hose. Wrapping the piping upward with the UV tape will help prevent rain and moisture from seeping into the overlaps of the tape. And then I used some electrical tape to lightly go around the top and bottom portions of the UV tape to further secure it. If you want the exterior piping and cables on the side of your home to have a more sleek and attractive look and to add some additional protection in the process, you can also order a mrcool Lifeguard line set cover. This is quick and easy to install, and it gives it a much more professional look in my opinion. The top piece gets added at the bottom side of the hole under the line set with a couple screws. You can then attach the longer channel pieces as needed for your install below, and they simply slide into place and attach with a few more screws. Before adding the line guard covers, use some spray foam to seal up and insulate the hole around where the line set comes out, and then attach any remaining channel pieces. The part that covers the hole will go on first and attach with screws, and the longer section then slides underneath and snaps into the channel. You may need to push the line set into the siding or slightly bend it to the left or right to fit inside the channel and cover area. Route the drain pipe so any water will drain away from the building. I ran the hose to the right through the bracket and then underneath the condenser unit, and then cut off the excess so it hangs above the ground. The lower portion of the line guard was screwed in place, which completes the line set cover. And if you haven't already, make sure to tighten your bolts where the condenser attaches to the bracket. It's 1/2 inch on bottom, 9/16 on top. There's also a drain at the bottom of the condenser unit you can attach this piece to, and then additional hose if you need to route it farther away from the area. We'll move on to the basic electrical hookup for this 12,000 BTU unit, which runs off 120 volt power. First, remove the cover toward the top where the electrical hooks up to the condenser. A little about my current setup. I have an electrical panel inside the building with a dedicated circuit that brings power out to this disconnect box, and from there it goes to the condenser. I'd recommend organizing your cables as best as possible, and zip ties will come in handy to keep that extra air handler cable tidied up. Of course, always make sure the incoming power supply is disconnected prior to working with any wiring, and hire an electrician if you don't have the knowledge or experience to wire it. We'll feed the black cable from the air handler through the left hole of the cover and secure it with the panel nut. mrcool labels each of the wires, which makes this portion of the electrical very easy. Loosen the connection screw and then insert the wire labeled 1 where it says 1 on the panel, and then you'll attach the wires labeled 2 and 3 in the corresponding locations in the panel as well. Make sure to tighten each connection securely, and then after the red, white, and black wires, unscrew the green screw and attach the green ground wire to it, then tighten. Next, I fed the power supply wires from the disconnect box through the right hole, tightened with a panel nut, and then connected them to the panel. The line wire, which is black, will go to the L connection. The white neutral wire goes to the N connection. And lastly, hook up the copper ground wire. Double check that all connections are nice and tight and that the wiring is correct according to your specific sized unit and the instructions prior to closing that panel back up. That completes the wiring for this specific unit, so I flipped the breaker back on inside and restored power at the disconnect box. Here's a look at my completed install. I was really happy with how it turned out and did my best to organize the extra cabling and coiled portion of the line set. I was able to tuck it down and between the bracket quite a bit, so there's still plenty of airflow behind the unit. And I did add a couple more pieces of pipe insulation around the connections at the condenser to insulate them. Then it was time to fire up the air handler inside the office. Now there is a USB smart key to insert in the front panel that enables the mini split to connect to Wi-Fi so it can be controlled from your phone. And there's also a remote to easily control it without a smart device if you'd prefer. Here's the first time turning on the unit on an 85-degree day on high setting to cool this place down quickly. I swept up the sawdust and debris from installing the air handler inside, then put the remote holder on the wall and started to use the mini split. The 12K, 18K, and 24K BTU models are all ENERGY STAR certified, so I think this is going to be an efficient unit to both cool and heat the 12x20 building throughout the year. And with the standard 7-year compressor and 5-year parts warranty, I feel good about it lasting a long time. If you're curious how loud the condenser is, here's what it sounds like from about 5 feet away, and it doesn't bother me at all. And moving back to about 20 feet, you can still hear it a little, but barely. Now here's a sound comparison of the mini split versus the window air conditioner we have in our home, and the mini split is significantly quieter, which is really nice. Now we are planning out an addition to the home, so I haven't figured out the long-term HVAC plan for the old part of the house, but I may be doing the multi-zone mrcool mini split to heat and cool the rooms and even get rid of some of those old electric baseboard heaters. I've been using the mrcool mini split system the last 3 weeks now, and it's honestly been a game changer in making the building a comfortable place to be in. It easily cools down the space on a hot day, and it heats up nicely in the morning when the outside temps drop to the mid-40s Fahrenheit overnight. I haven't tested it in extreme cold temperatures yet, but it sounds like it will heat as long as it doesn't go below negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'll have to see how it performs then. All in all, I thought installing the mini split was very DIY friendly, and I believe it can be tackled in a weekend as long as you have electrical figured out and your equipment and supplies ready to go. I wish I had installed a mini split sooner, but now that I know how great they work and about the install process, I won't hesitate to add a system to our existing home or a shop. If you're wondering about price, at the time this video was published, the 12,000 BTU ductless mini split kit meant to cool and heat up to 500 square feet is about $1,738. Now there are a few different vendors to choose from, so check each website, as I've seen some lower prices and promotions from time to time, but being comfortable where you live or work is well worth the investment in my opinion. Let me know what you thought of the project and what your experiences are with mini splits, or if you're thinking about putting one in.
All right, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed checking out the process of how this DIY mini split by mrcool was installed. If you enjoyed checking out the process and found the video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And for more information about the mrcool mini splits, you can check out the links in my description below. Thanks again for watching, and cheers from Montana.